Caitlin, 8 months pregnant, was shoved to the ground by two fake security guards who were bullying her and her husband Jason over a trivial neighborhood rule. These imposters, using their fake authority, pushed them too far, threatening to escalate things. But when Jason, a trained Delta Force veteran, stepped in, his instincts turned the situation around. What happened next was a shocking turn of events, leading to justice being served in the end. Caitlin, 8 months pregnant, had planned for nothing more than a peaceful stroll with her husband Jason through their quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind of evening that should have felt serene, with the fading sun casting warm hues over the tidy lawns, the sound of crickets beginning to hum in the background. It was supposed to be a moment to relax, to step outside and breathe, before the chaos of the final stretch of her pregnancy took over. But then, out of nowhere, everything shifted. Two men dressed in matching security uniforms with fake HOA logos, too crisp, too perfect to be real, approached them with an air of authority that felt wrong. Their steps were deliberate, slow, as if they knew they had the upper hand. "Excuse me, ma'am," one of them said, his voice cold and clipped. "You've violated complex regulations by leaving toys outside." Caitlin blinked, looking around. It was a simple plastic toy truck, one of their son's favorite things, left in the front yard after he had played. Nothing unusual, nothing out of place. But these men stood there, blocking her path, like the world would stop if she didn't listen to their rules. She tried to explain, her voice shaking slightly. "We'll take it inside. It's just a toy, it's not—" Before she could finish, the man stepped forward, his hand suddenly on her shoulder, and in a single, shocking motion, shoved her, not just gently, but enough that she stumbled backward. Caitlin gasped, her heart racing as she caught herself against the sidewalk. But the damage was done. Jason's mind couldn't register what he was seeing. His wife, pregnant and vulnerable, knocked off balance by someone he didn't even know. He froze in disbelief, feeling an unfamiliar wave of fear wash over him. His hands clenched into fists. The anger started to build, but he was stunned, disoriented. Was this really happening? Was this his life now? His wife, carrying their child, pushed by these strangers over something as trivial as a forgotten toy? And then the realization hit him like a wave. This wasn't about the toy. This wasn't about rules. It was about power, control, and the humiliation of someone who couldn't fight back. Jason wanted to move, to do something, but the shock held him in place. His heart pounded in his chest as he watched Caitlin steady herself, her eyes wide, blinking back the shock just as he was. Jason's anger, which had been smoldering since the moment Caitlin was shoved, suddenly erupted like a volcano. He could feel his blood pressure spike, his fists clenching at his sides, his breath coming in shallow gasps. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to take action, to protect his wife, to stop the madness that was unfolding in front of him. These men weren't real security guards. They were imposters, fraudulent players in a game they had no right to be part of. Their uniforms were too pristine, too rehearsed, and Jason recognized the arrogance in their eyes. This wasn't about rules. It wasn't about order. It was about power, a desperate grab for control over someone they deemed easy to intimidate. One of the men stepped closer, pointing an accusatory finger at Jason. "You're obstructing justice. You need to step back, or we'll escalate this." Jason's eyes narrowed, his pulse hammered in his ears, drowning out the rest of their words. He wasn't listening to the lies anymore. His mind wasn't on the childish act of pushing around a pregnant woman. It was focused entirely on the violation of something far greater. These men were pretending to hold power, pretending to enforce laws they had no right to impose. The thought of it twisted something deep within him. He didn't hesitate. Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out his phone and started recording. The camera's lens focused on the two men, capturing their faces, the arrogance on display, their every movement. He knew he had to document this. The video would speak for him when words weren't enough. "You don't have the right to do this," Jason said, his voice low and dangerous, but steady. He kept his phone aimed directly at them, making sure every detail was recorded. "You're not real officers. You have no legal authority here." The men exchanged glances, but the arrogance in their expressions didn't falter. They were used to pushing people around, to bending the rules. And now that Jason had called them out, they had no intention of backing down. "You can't film us," the second man barked. "It's against the rules." Jason's heart pounded louder. Rules? The only rules that mattered were the ones that protected people. What kind of coward hides behind fake authority, pretending to be something they were not? The more they pushed, the more the hatred built inside him. It wasn't just the injustice, it was the sheer audacity of it all. They were trying to break Caitlin's spirit, trying to make her feel small, powerless, and that was something Jason could never allow. The men weren't just imposters, they were bullies. They were trying to use fear to manipulate and control, and Jason would make sure they realized just how wrong they were. His fingers tightened around the phone, a cold fire burning in his chest. He would make them pay for this. He wouldn't let them get away with it. The moment the second man made a move toward Caitlin again, something in Jason snapped. A flash of white-hot fury surged through him, and in that instant, everything else disappeared. The world slowed, as though time had stretched, and all he could hear was the rapid pounding of his own heart, the blood rushing to his ears. He didn't think. He didn't hesitate. His Delta Force training surged forward, taking control of his body before his mind could catch up. In a single fluid motion, Jason lunged. His hand shot out, grabbing the closest man by the collar, the fabric crumpling in his fist as he yanked him off balance. The man didn't have time to react before Jason shoved him with a brutal force, pinning him against the brick wall of a nearby house. The man's eyes widened in shock as he slammed against the hard surface, gasping for breath, his chest heaving. Jason's grip on his collar tightened, the weight of his anger pouring into every movement, every ounce of strength. "You're done," Jason growled, his voice low and lethal. It wasn't just the words. There was an undeniable force behind them, the kind of raw, controlled fury that only a man trained for combat could deliver. This wasn't a simple confrontation anymore. This was personal. His hands, once capable of fine-tuned precision under extreme pressure, were now shaking with rage. But there was no fear. Jason's military instincts had taken over, and every fiber of his being was focused on the threat in front of him. The man was nothing but a coward with a fake uniform, trying to impose control over someone he had no right to harm. This wasn't just about defending his family anymore. It wasn't even about protecting Caitlin. It was about standing up for what was right. It was about fighting back against people who used their fake authority to belittle and intimidate. Jason's jaw clenched as he leaned in closer to the man, his voice steady but venomous. "You thought you could push us around, huh? You thought you could get away with this?" The man sputtered, trying to breathe, his hands clawing uselessly at Jason's arm, but Jason's grip only tightened. His entire body was rigid with fury, every muscle straining to keep the man in place, to make him feel the weight of his wrongs. The scene was no longer about the toy or the fake rules. It was about power. It was about Jason reminding this imposter that he would never allow anyone to trample on his family without consequences. With every second that passed, Jason's anger grew, feeding into the strength that now coursed through his veins. This wasn't a fight for survival. It was a fight for justice. The sound of sirens cut through the tension in the air, a sharp contrast to the heaviness that had settled over the neighborhood. Within minutes, the real police arrived, their vehicles screeching to a halt in front of the scene. Jason stood his ground, his body still pulsing with adrenaline, watching as the imposters panicked. They tried to flee, clumsily turning and attempting to sprint down the street. But they didn't get far. The officers, already out of their cars and quickly assessing the situation, moved swiftly. One cop grabbed the first man, pulling him to the ground, while another restrained the second. The men struggled, but they were no match for the real authorities. Their desperate attempts to escape were short-lived, quickly drowned out by the sound of handcuffs snapping shut. Jason, still standing tall, remained calm as he approached the officers. He felt no rush, no need to add to the chaos. He had already done what needed to be done. The anger that had surged through him only moments before had been replaced by a quiet resolve. He pulled out his phone, unlocking it, and handed it to one of the officers. "Here's the video," Jason said, his voice steady, without a trace of the fury that had driven him earlier. The officer took the phone and scrolled through the footage, eyes narrowing as he watched the entire encounter. The evidence was clear. There was no question about it. These men were impersonating security officers, Jason continued, his voice unwavering as he explained the situation. They assaulted my wife and tried to use their fake authority to intimidate us. The officers nodded, already beginning the paperwork, confirming the charges of impersonation and assault. Jason didn't need to say anything more. The law was taking care of the rest. Caitlin, still standing beside him, clutched his arm tightly, her face pale from the shock of it all. But Jason could see the faintest hint of relief in her eyes. This was over, the threat was gone, and they had won. As the fake guards were led away, Jason stood still, his eyes fixed on the scene unfolding before him. There was no triumph in his gaze, no loud declarations. He didn't need any of that. The satisfaction he felt was quiet, almost somber, but undeniable. He had done what was necessary. He had protected his family. And in the end, justice had been served. As the officers finished their work, Jason glanced down at Caitlin, squeezing her hand reassuringly. "We're safe now," he said softly. It wasn't just the words, it was the certainty behind them. The world felt right again, even if just for this moment. The deep satisfaction of standing up for what was right, for his family, washed over him, grounding him in a way that no amount of chaos could ever shake. In the end, they had won.